I raised you. I gave you everything. And you gave her permission to destroy me. That's what I said, my voice calm, steady, and ice-cold, while standing in front of the 3 people I once called my family. Laura, the woman I spent 27 years building a life with, sat in silence. Her face, once so familiar, now looked like a stranger's, a stranger who had weaponized affection and wore betrayal like perfume. Rachel and Emily, my daughters, stood across from me, tears streaking down their cheeks. But I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. I know everything, I said, lifting the thick folder from the table and slamming it down. Bank records. Photos. Messages. Screenshots of them discussing helping Mom explore. It was all there. You didn't just enable her, I continued, you helped her finance her new life. You laughed behind my back while she emptied our savings to chase flings with men half her age. Rachel gasped. Emily shook her head in denial. Do you know what hurts the most? I asked, voice low. It's not that your mother cheated. It's that my daughters thought it was progressive. Then I dropped the real bomb. This house? It's not your home anymore. I spoke to the lawyer this morning. I'm cutting financial ties. No more tuition help. No more allowances. And your mother? She'll be getting nothing but her name back. Laura stood abruptly. You can't do this. You're punishing your own children. No, Laura. I'm holding them accountable. Something you clearly never taught them. I turned to Rachel and Emily, who now looked like kids again, not confident women, but daughters watching their world collapse. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to save myself. And with that, I walked out. Not with fury. With peace. Thank you for sticking with me through this story. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from those you love most, know this, healing begins the moment you choose yourself. Drop a 1 in the comments if this hit home. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that losing others can sometimes be the first step to finding yourself. And now, let's dive into this gripping story together. The night I found out my daughters helped my wife cheat was the night everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. Not just my marriage, not just my home, but the very core of who I was. I sat in the dark, back pressed against the wall outside our bedroom, listening to whispers that weren't meant for me. I didn't hear moans. I didn't walk in on anyone. What I heard was worse. It was the sound of my daughters, my own flesh and blood, laughing softly, nervously, talking about how their mother had actually done it. How the idea they tossed around like a trendy, harmless suggestion had turned into a storm none of us would ever escape from. They'd told her about an app. They joked about open marriage. And now, she was using it to sneak around behind my back. They didn't mean to destroy the family. But they did. That night was the end of something. But strangely, it was also the beginning. The start of a different version of me. Not the quiet husband. Not the predictable dad. That man died with the trust he had in his wife, in his daughters. This is the story of how I rebuilt myself from that rubble. My name is Andrew Palmer. I'm 54 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. Or at least, I used to. I worked as a senior accountant for over 25 years. I had a modest life, a small circle of friends, a reputation for being reliable, steady, maybe even boring. But boring men sleep well at night, at least, we used to. I've always been the type to show up, keep my promises, provide. I wasn't flashy. I didn't throw romantic surprises every weekend or post grand gestures online. But I took care of my family. I coached my daughter's soccer teams. I handled college tuition with pride. I cleaned up dog vomit at 3 a.m. without ever waking up my wife. That's who I was. My daughters, Rachel and Emily, were the light of my life. Watching them grow into intelligent, confident young women gave me more joy than I ever thought possible. I thought I was doing right by them. I thought we had a solid foundation. I thought wrong. Sometimes, the cracks in your life aren't visible until the entire structure comes crashing down. And once you see the truth, there's no one seeing it. You just learn how to survive it. Laura and I had been married for 27 years. She was 51, still striking, still sharp, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people pay attention without even meaning to. When we first met, she had this wild ambition in her eyes, like she wanted to taste every part of life before it got stale. I was the opposite. I brought calm to her chaos, she said. We balanced each other. In the early years, we had passion. Not the kind that burned the house down, but the kind that simmered steady and warm. We didn't need to impress each other. We just fit. There was comfort in the routine. Saturday pancakes. Sunday walks. Weeknight Netflix. She used to reach for my hand during movies like it was automatic. But somewhere in the last few years, something shifted. At first, I thought it was age. Fatigue. The natural ebb of long marriage. But then things started changing too fast, too sharp to be subtle. She became bolder in bed, more experimental. She wore perfume to run errands, even to the grocery store. And most of all, she stopped talking. Not completely. Just enough that I could feel the distance growing, and I didn't know why. But I was about to find out. It started with little things. Laura's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was suddenly always in her hand or face down and locked with a code I didn't know. Notifications were silenced. She started dressing differently, too. Not drastically, but just enough for me to notice. She wore tighter jeans, blouses that showed more skin, even heels to run errands. She claimed it was for confidence, and I didn't question it at first. After all, she looked good, and I figured maybe she just wanted to feel that way. But then came the perfume. She'd wear it to the store, to the post office, to the gym, but not for our dinners or date nights. And then, of course, there was the bedroom. We went from routine, familiar lovemaking to something different. She got bold. She tried things she used to brush off with a laugh or not my thing. Suddenly, it was like I was sleeping with a stranger who'd read a manual. At first, I convinced myself this was a good thing, maybe she was rediscovering herself, reigniting our passion. But the way she touched me felt rehearsed. Studied. Not like a woman falling in love again, but one who'd learned new tricks elsewhere. I didn't want to believe it at first. I kept telling myself it was in my head. That maybe I was the one growing distant, or too stuck in routine to see her changes for what they were. But it was the silence that got me. The long pauses during dinner. The way she stared at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. The quiet shift from we to me in our conversations. Our home, once filled with the soft noise of shared life, had gone still. And I realized, slowly and painfully, that I was becoming a guest in my own marriage. She was living her life beside me, not with me. I'd walk through the front door after work, and she'd barely look up. My daughters had started doing the same. I'd say something, and there would be this pause, like they were editing their thoughts before speaking. That stung the most. The three people I had built my life around, now moving in some orbit that I was no longer a part of. I was still in the house, still paying the bills, still sitting at the table, but emotionally, I was already gone. Or maybe they were. Either way, I wasn't ready for the truth that was coming. One night, long after the lights were out and the house had gone still, I woke to the faint hum of Laura's voice. It wasn't unusual for her to take late-night calls with her sister or friends, but something about her tone made me sit up in bed. I crept quietly down the hall, stopping just outside her office door, which was cracked open just enough for sound to slip through. Her voice was low, a whisper, but I could make out just enough. No, he has no idea. I told him I was going to bed early. He's still clueless, it's kind of impressive. There was a short laugh, her laugh, but different. Lighter. Carefree. Then another voice, a man's this time, replying, "Tomorrow night then? Same place?" She giggled again. Same time. You better not be late this time. I stood there frozen, back pressed against the hallway wall, trying to process what I was hearing without falling apart. I didn't hear anything explicitly damning, but it didn't have to be. That kind of tone, that kind of secrecy, it didn't belong in a faithful marriage. I backed away from the door like it might explode, made my way back to bed, and stared at the ceiling for hours, my heart pounding like a war drum. She returned an hour later, slipped under the covers without a word, and fell asleep like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I lay there beside her, wide awake, trying to remember how we got here. It was hard not to let my mind wander back to our wedding day, standing at the altar in a small mountain chapel just outside Boulder, watching Laura walk toward me in a simple white dress with bare shoulders and wildflowers in her hair. Her smile back then was honest. Nervous, but genuine. I remember thinking she looked more like herself in that moment than I'd ever seen. We were young. I didn't have much, just a modest salary and a used car, but I had certainty. I was sure about her. I was sure about us. I remember the way her hand slipped into mine during our vows, like it belonged there. And I kept that promise, every damn word of it. I didn't stray. I didn't wander. I worked overtime when she wanted to go back to school. I sold my bike when we needed the down payment for the house. I changed careers to have more time with the kids. I gave, and I gave, and I gave, thinking that's what love was supposed to look like. And now here I was, lying next to a woman who flirted on secret calls while I slept 3 feet away, who laughed like a teenager with some man I couldn't name. I wasn't angry yet, not the kind that makes you yell. It was a slower ache, a hollowing out. I felt like a man who had spent decades building a home, only to realize the foundation had been rotting for years. And the worst part? I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of her I had made up in my head. Either way, that love was starting to feel like a cruel joke. I withdrew without meaning to. It wasn't a conscious decision, but something inside me began shutting down the moment I heard that late-night conversation. I stopped reaching for Laura's hand when we passed each other in the kitchen. I stopped kissing her on the forehead when I left for work. I became an observer in my own home, quietly collecting details, piecing together the puzzle of the woman I thought I knew. I started journaling, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see the patterns. Every little thing went into that notebook. November 4th, Laura too tired for dinner but left the house at 9:30 p.m. didn't say where. November 10th, new lingerie in the laundry, never seen before. November 15th, locked in office for hours, took phone calls outside. Writing it down made it real. There was no gaslighting myself, no brushing it off as paranoia. I was seeing my marriage disintegrate in real time, like a slow-motion car crash where I was the only one who knew we were about to hit the wall. I noticed how she laughed at her phone but barely smiled at me. I noticed how she took more selfies, angled just right, lips slightly parted like she was practicing for someone else's attention. She was here, but she wasn't here. And the worst part was that my daughters didn't seem surprised. If anything, they looked at me with something close to pity, like I was the last fool in the room to get the joke. Then came the night I found proof. It was after midnight. I got up for water, moving through the house like a ghost, when I noticed Laura's office door was cracked open. Her laptop screen glowed in the dim light. She wasn't there. Probably in bed already. But the screen was paused on a video call, a man's face frozen mid-smile. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. The call had ended, but the audio was still playing in the chat box, the last few seconds caught on a recording. I reached out, heart pounding, and tapped the keyboard. The voice was unmistakable, it wasn't just any man. It was one of my daughter's friends. Younger, maybe late 20s, someone I had seen in our home before. I'll book the place for next weekend. Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. Then Laura's voice, softer than I had heard in years. You'd better. I don't do sloppy. I yanked my hand back from the laptop like it had burned me. I had suspected. I had gathered evidence. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I realized my wife wasn't just cheating, she was doing it with someone half her age, someone close enough to our family that it made me sick. Doubt had been manageable. Doubt let me pretend. But this? This was something else. This was a knife between the ribs. And I had just started bleeding. The next crack in my world came unexpectedly. I left work early on a Tuesday, some excuse about a migraine, though the real pain was in my chest, not my head. I couldn't focus, couldn't pretend everything was normal when I knew the truth was rotting beneath the surface. I needed space. I needed answers. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Both of my daughter's cars were parked outside. Rachel and Emily weren't supposed to be home. They were in college, busy with classes, social lives, and whatever else young adults did when they stopped needing their father. But today, they were here. And as soon as I stepped inside, I heard them talking upstairs. Their voices were hushed, urgent, like they didn't want to be overheard. That only made me listen harder. I stayed at the bottom of the staircase, heart hammering, and strained to hear the words drifting down through the quiet of the house. Rachel sighed. "I can't believe Mom actually did it." Emily snorted. "I know, right? We joked about it, but damn. She really took it and ran." There was a pause, then Rachel's voice softened. "Do you think Dad knows?" My blood turned to ice. "Knows what?" I took a slow step back, suddenly afraid that if they saw me, I'd crack wide open. Emily sighed. "He's too old-fashioned. He still thinks people stay together just because they should." "But Mom." "I mean, she was miserable. She needed this. We just gave her the push." Another pause. "You really don't think she's going to tell him?" Rachel let out a dry laugh. "Are you kidding? Why would she? She's living her best life right now. And besides, what's he gonna do? Divorce her? Be serious." I gripped the stair railing so hard my knuckles turned white. My own daughters had encouraged it. Maybe they hadn't meant for her to cheat, maybe they thought they were just being modern, progressive, whatever the hell they wanted to call it, but the fact remained, they had handed her the blueprint to betray me. And she had followed it, step by step. The betrayal wasn't just coming from Laura. It was coming from the girls I had raised, the ones I had sacrificed for, the ones I thought would always have my back. I felt like a fool standing there, hearing my own daughters discuss my ignorance like I was some sad relic of the past. My stomach twisted as Emily spoke again, her voice quieter now. I feel bad. He loves her, you know? Like, actual love. The kind people don't have anymore." Rachel exhaled sharply. "Yeah. And that's why it sucks. He still thinks love is enough." The silence that followed was worse than their words. Because deep down, I knew they were right. I had spent my entire life believing love would always be enough. But I was wrong. And I had never felt more alone. I stood there, frozen, as my daughter's words rattled through my skull, each syllable striking like a hammer against the fragile remains of the life I thought I had. I wasn't just hearing a conversation, I was witnessing the unraveling of decades. I saw Rachel as a 5-year-old, standing on a chair at the kitchen counter while I taught her how to make pancakes, her tiny fingers gripping the whisk as she beamed up at me. I saw Emily at 10, crying after scraping her knee on the sidewalk, her arms around my neck as I carried her inside, promising her she'd be okay. I had been there for every school play, every late-night fever, every heartbreak. I had worked late shifts, turned down promotions, sacrificed in ways they would never even know just so they could have everything. And now, those same daughters, the ones I raised, the ones I protected, had helped their mother betray me. And worse, they didn't even sound guilty. They weren't whispering about how to fix it, how to stop it. They were debating whether I was even worth telling. As if I were too simple, too outdated to understand that love was an obsolete currency. My legs felt weak, but my anger held me upright. I took a slow breath, then another. And then I spoke. "Rachel. Emily. Downstairs. Now. My voice was calm, but it cut through the house like a blade. The murmurs above me stopped. There was a beat of hesitation, then footsteps. They appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, their carefully constructed reality collapsing as they saw my face. Rachel spoke first. "Dad," I held up a hand. "Don't." They froze. I could feel my own pulse in my throat as I spoke, my voice eerily steady. "I heard everything." Their faces drained of color. Emily's lips parted like she wanted to explain, to soften the blow, but no words came. I stepped forward, the weight of betrayal pressing into my chest. "You encouraged her. You justified it. You made it easier for her to sneak around behind my back. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Rachel's chin trembled. "Dad, it wasn't like that. We just thought." "No," I snapped, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "You didn't think. You didn't think about me, about this family. You thought you were being enlightened, giving her permission to shatter our home." Emily was crying now, tears running down her face. "We never meant, but you did," I cut in. "You did this." My chest rose and fell, breath ragged. "Get out." They blinked at me, as if they had misheard. "What?" Rachel whispered. I didn't repeat myself. "Go back to school. Go wherever you want. But you don't live under my roof anymore." Emily let out a sob. "Dad, please," I shook my head, my vision blurring. "I need space. And I need to stop looking at you and seeing the moment my family died." Their cries followed me as I turned away, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because the moment I did, I knew I'd fall apart. And I wasn't ready for that yet. I wasn't the kind of man who jumped to conclusions. I needed proof, undeniable, unshakable truth that no excuse could explain away. So the morning after I threw my daughters out, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Tom, a grizzled ex-cop in his 60s who looked like he'd seen enough infidelity cases to last 3 lifetimes. He had a thick, weathered face, the kind that never showed surprise, and a voice like gravel. When I walked into his office, he barely glanced up from his black coffee before nodding to the chair across from him. "You look like a man who already knows the answer but needs someone else to say it out loud," he muttered, taking a sip. I swallowed hard, forcing out the words. "My wife is cheating. I need to know how bad." Tom exhaled through his nose, set his cup down, and pulled out a notepad. "All right," he said, flipping to a blank page. "Let's find out." A week later, he slid a manila folder across the table. I had braced myself for the worst, but I wasn't ready for what I saw. 3 names. 3 men. Derek, a gym owner in his late 40s, muscular, clean-cut, exactly the kind of guy Laura would have mocked a year ago. Luke, a heavily tattooed artist from a shop downtown, half her age, someone who looked like he belonged in a band, not in my wife's bed. And the last one, the worst one, Brian. Or, as he called himself online, Nacho Man. The name alone made my stomach churn. He was just some guy she found on an anonymous hookup app. No connection, no history, just someone to indulge whatever fantasy she was chasing. Tom's voice was calm, almost detached. "She's met up with each of them multiple times over the last few months. Derek was the first. They started seeing each other at a hotel near his gym. Luke came next, she met him at a gallery, then started visiting his shop. And Brian, well, that one's just pure recklessness. They met in a motel off the highway. Paid in cash." My fingers clenched the folder so tightly it started to crumple. The weight of it all pressed against my ribs, suffocating. My wife wasn't having an affair, she was living an entirely separate life. Then came the messages. I wasn't prepared for how explicit they were. Tom had screenshots, texts, even snippets of audio. Laura, the woman who used to roll her eyes at anything remotely risque, was now sending men things I never even knew she was capable of saying. Damn, you really know how to take control. My husband could never. I swear, I've never felt this alive before. And the worst one, the one that set my entire world spinning, YOLO. Might as well enjoy my second youth while he withers away. I felt my breath leave my body. You only live once. That's what she told herself while she snuck around behind my back. That's what she whispered to her lovers in the dark while I lay awake, wondering why she didn't touch me the same way anymore. That was her justification. A goddamn #philosophy. I closed the folder, fingers shaking. I thought I'd cry. I thought I'd scream. But all I felt was the slow, steady rise of something deeper. Something colder. Tom studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly, like he recognized what was happening behind my eyes. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know yet. I just knew I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk away from this unscathed. My daughters had unknowingly opened the door for her to betray me. But I was the one who was about to slam it shut. Permanently. The betrayal should have ended there, but it didn't. Cheating was one thing, devastating, humiliating, a wound that might never fully heal. But the moment I checked our shared finances, I realized Laura hadn't just stolen my dignity, she had stolen my future. I was reviewing statements for the divorce, going through the motions, preparing to cut legal ties cleanly, when something didn't add up. Our retirement fund was lighter than it should have been. $72,000 lighter. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A glitch. Maybe I had miscalculated withdrawals or forgotten an investment shift. But as I scrolled through months of transactions, my stomach dropped. The money hadn't just disappeared. Laura had taken it. And she hadn't used it for something understandable, no sudden medical expenses, no hidden debts. No. She had siphoned thousands of dollars out of our retirement to fund her secret life. I dug deeper, pulling up bank statements, PayPal records, Venmo transfers. The details read like a crime scene. Luxury hotel stays. Dinners at high-end restaurants we had never been to together. Spa appointments. Plane tickets. Some of the money had been transferred to unknown accounts, names I didn't recognize, people I had never heard of. Had she given these men money? Was she paying for their company? The thought made me sick. My wife had drained our hard-earned savings, not for us, not for our family, but for her affairs. She had stolen from me in the most personal way possible, she had reached into the future we built together and burned it for her own pleasure. I found a transaction for $3,500 labeled event deposit. My mind reeled. Was it a trip? A secret getaway? Or worse, was it a wedding venue? Was she planning to move on before we even signed the divorce papers? I felt like I was drowning, like my life was being rewritten before my eyes into a story I no longer recognized. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling over the keyboard, staring at the numbers that had defined my sense of security for years. That money wasn't just money. It was supposed to be Rachel and Emily's safety net for grad school. It was supposed to be the emergency cushion for when life threw something unexpected at us. It was the difference between an easy retirement and one spent worrying about bills. And now, it was gone. Not because of some financial crisis. Not because of an unavoidable hardship. Because my wife wanted to play out some fantasy. Because she wanted to pretend she was young again, desired, free. She stole from me to fund her freedom. And she hadn't even looked back. I took a slow breath, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The rage was coming now, not the wild, explosive kind but the deep, simmering kind. The kind that stayed. I had already lost my wife. I had already lost my daughters. But I would be damned if I let her take one more thing from me without a fight. I spent the entire next day preparing for war. I laid everything out on the dining table, the photos, the texts, the bank statements, even printouts of her hotel receipts. It wasn't just evidence, it was a complete dissection of her betrayal, displayed in black and white for her to choke on. By the time Laura walked through the door that evening, I was already sitting at the table, waiting. She barely glanced at me as she dropped her purse onto the counter, reaching for her phone like it was a lifeline. Then she saw it. Her body stiffened, her fingers hovering over the screen before curling into a fist. She knew. She didn't have to ask what this was. Her eyes flicked over the papers, first the screenshots of her texts with Derek, Luke, and Nacho Man, then the bank statements, then the withdrawal records. Her face paled, but she didn't crumble. No tears. No shame. Just silence. Finally, she exhaled through her nose and crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, as if she were annoyed rather than caught. "So," she said, her voice cold, "you've been spying on me." I laughed, sharp and bitter. That was her first response? Not denial, not regret, just turning it back on me? Spying? I echoed, shaking my head. You think I needed a private investigator to know something was wrong? You were practically flaunting it. I gestured to the evidence. This isn't spying, Laura. This is proof. Proof that you've been screwing other men while I've been sleeping in the same bed. Proof that you've been draining our accounts to fund your little adventures. She didn't even look at the papers again. Instead, she sighed, rubbing her temples like I was exhausting her. Andrew, she murmured, I don't know what to tell you. I was unhappy. 4 years. And you were never there. I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of that statement. Never there? I repeated, voice rising. I was here every goddamn day, Laura. I worked for us. I provided for us. I was building a future for this family while you were out screwing strangers in motels. She scoffed, shaking her head. Oh, please. You think throwing money at a marriage is enough? You think just existing in this house meant we were happy? You haven't really looked at me in years, Andrew. I felt like a ghost. Like a piece of furniture you walked past on your way to work. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She was actually trying to turn this on me. Trying to make it seem like her affairs were my fault. Like her betrayal was some inevitable reaction to my supposed neglect. I could feel the rage burning beneath my ribs, but I forced myself to stay calm. So instead of talking to me, you decided to F*** other men? I said, voice low. Instead of telling me you were unhappy, you emptied our retirement account and spent it on hotel rooms and steak dinners with guys named Nacho Man? Her jaw tightened. You would have shut me down, she shot back. You always do. You're so stuck in your ways, so convinced that you're this perfect husband. But you never listened to me, Andrew. I needed more. 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 As if 27 years of marriage, of sacrifices, of raising 2 children together wasn't enough. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking as I reached for the divorce papers sitting at the end of the table. Well, now you'll have all the freedom you want, I said, sliding them toward her. Sign them. And get the hell out of my house. She stared at the papers like they were poison, her pride refusing to let her reach for the pen. But I wasn't done. I had one more thing to say, and I made sure every word landed exactly where it needed to. You weren't bored, Laura, I said slowly, locking eyes with her. You were cowardly. You didn't want to fix anything. You didn't want to work through it or face uncomfortable truths. You wanted a thrill without having to risk anything. You wanted to feel young again, sexy again, without dealing with the fallout. You wanted excitement, but only if you could get away with it. You didn't cheat because I was emotionally absent. You cheated because you thought I'd never find out. You gambled our entire life together for a few months of ego boosts, and now you're mad that the house of cards collapsed. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Maybe it was finally hitting her. Maybe the weight of what she'd done was finally cracking through that icy exterior. But I didn't care. I was done holding space for her feelings. I had carried her emotional baggage for years. That weight wasn't mine anymore. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping back against the hardwood floor. You don't get to be the victim in this story, Laura. Not anymore. She didn't say anything. Her mouth quivered, her eyes welled with tears, but I stood there stone-faced, unmoved. She finally sank into the chair, staring down at the documents like they belonged to someone else. Her shoulders shook once, twice, and then the sobs started, quiet at first, then heavier, her hands covering her face. But I didn't reach out. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say anything. Because this time, she would sit in the wreckage alone. The next morning, I met with my attorney and filed the paperwork. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some endings aren't meant to be revisited. Some doors, once closed, should stay shut forever. I moved into a lakeside cabin an hour outside Denver, a small, quiet place that belonged to an old friend who offered it without question. It wasn't much, just a single bedroom, a modest kitchen, and a front porch that overlooked the water, but it was exactly what I needed. Silence. Space. A chance to exist without the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. In the mornings, I'd sit outside with my coffee, staring at the way the lake mirrored the sky, watching the mist roll across the surface. Some days, I felt like a man who had lost everything. Other days, I felt like I had been freed from something I hadn't even realized was suffocating me. I wasn't healed. The rage, the grief, the hollow ache of disappointment, it all still lived inside me. But for the first time in a long time, I was no longer waiting for answers or explanations. The truth had been laid bare. And now, I had the rest of my life to figure out what came next. It was nearly 3 months before I saw Rachel and Emily again. I had ignored their calls, their texts, their weak attempts to check in after the divorce. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But one crisp autumn morning, I heard a car pull up outside. A soft knock followed. When I opened the door, they were standing there, Rachel holding 2 coffees, Emily clutching a manila envelope. They looked different. Softer. Smaller. Guilty. "Dad," Rachel said, voice quiet, uncertain. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Just studied them, these daughters of mine, these girls I had raised and loved more than anything, who had unknowingly handed their mother the tools to destroy me. Finally, I stepped aside, letting them in. They sat at my small wooden table, hands wrapped around their coffee cups like they were holding on for dear life. Emily slid the envelope toward me. "It's pictures. From when we were little. We thought maybe," she swallowed hard. "Maybe they'd remind you of, before." I hesitated before picking it up, flipping through old photos of birthday parties, beach trips, lazy Sunday mornings on the couch. A different life. A different us. Rachel was the first to break. "We were wrong, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We thought we were helping Mom. We thought maybe an open marriage would fix things, that it would make her stay. We never imagined she'd take it and run. We didn't think about what it would do to you." Emily sniffled, eyes red-rimmed. "We hate what happened. We hate that we were part of it. And we don't expect you to forgive us, but we just wanted you to know that we're sorry. For everything." I let out a slow breath, staring down at the table, at the pictures of my little girls who had grown up believing love was something optional, something you could gamble with and redefine when it became inconvenient. I wasn't sure I could forgive them. But I also wasn't sure I wanted to spend the rest of my life hating them. Finally, I met their eyes, the anger inside me settling into something quieter. "I don't know how to fix this," I admitted. "But if you're willing to try, then so am I." It wasn't a grand moment. It wasn't a perfect resolution. But as Rachel let out a shaky breath and Emily reached across the table for my hand, I realized it was enough, for now. One evening, after Rachel and Emily left, I sat on the cabin's porch, letting the cool autumn air settle over me. On a whim, I pulled out my phone, something I had avoided for weeks, and typed Laura's name into the search bar. Her social media was public now, no more carefully curated family photos, no more posts about the girls' college milestones or holiday gatherings. Instead, my screen flooded with a new version of her life, one I barely recognized. Pictures of her in nightclubs, arms wrapped around men I had never seen. Hashtags like #livingfree and #finallyme. There was even a photo of her in some rooftop bar, a cocktail in hand, her smile wide and careless. The caption read, "New city, new adventures. No more looking back." I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel something, anger, bitterness, regret. But all I felt was distance. This woman, this version of Laura, wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never had been. She was a stranger now, someone chasing a second youth that would eventually slip through her fingers. And for the first time, I realized I didn't envy her. I didn't miss her. I had spent so many months thinking I had lost something. But looking at those pictures, I understood the truth. She was the one who had lost me. A few days later, I drove back to town for the first time since the divorce papers were signed. The house, the one I had spent years building, fixing, making into a home, stood in front of me, unchanged except for the for sale sign planted firmly in the front yard. I parked across the street, watching the wind push at the edges of the sign, making it sway slightly. The windows were dark. Empty. Just like the life we had once filled it with. I thought about the nights spent at that dining table, laughing with Rachel and Emily over takeout, Laura curled up on the couch reading her novels, the dog we used to have scratching at the back door to be let in. The memories were still there, but the home was gone. And that was okay. Some places aren't meant to be revisited. Some doors, once closed, are better left locked. I exhaled and turned the key in the ignition, leaving behind the last physical piece of my old life. Driving back to the lake, I thought about the man I had been when this all started. Quiet. Loyal. Blind. A man who had believed love was enough, that trust was unshakable, that family was unbreakable. I had been wrong about all of it. But I wasn't that man anymore. Now, I was sharper. Stronger. Wiser. I had learned that sometimes love isn't enough, self-respect is. That trust isn't unshakable, it's a privilege that can be revoked. And that family, as much as it can be built, can also be lost. But loss isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes, it's a second chance in disguise. I wasn't just a man who had been betrayed. I was a man who had survived it. And that was enough. If your own children handed your spouse the blueprint to cheat, whether intentionally or not, would you ever be able to trust again? That's the question I still ask myself some nights. Not out of bitterness, but out of reflection. Trust, once broken at that level, doesn't heal with time alone. It heals with choice. With boundaries. With understanding that love, even from your own blood, can come wrapped in naivety and misjudgment. Some betrayals don't come from enemies. They don't come from strangers in the dark. They come from the people you held when they were small. The ones you taught to ride bikes and tie shoes. The ones you stayed up late for, worrying about their futures. They come from the people you raised to love you, yet in one misguided moment, they forget how. And still, healing is possible. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by choosing who you become after. That's what I'm learning. Every day. To every man watching this, when your peace is destroyed, don't fight to get it back, build a stronger one. Brick by painful brick. Because sometimes, losing them is how you finally find yourself.